Bienvenidos, Ushamdi, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the Spring 2023 semester taking the CTS-233 Section 400 Network Programmability course. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's DEVASC 200-901 Certification Exam Preparation course, and in Lab 7.4.8, another very cool lab, we are going to be using Ansible to actually automate the installation and configuration of an Apache web server. And so you're going to be walking away from this lab with the knowledge in the Ansible files to go off, run an Ansible playbook. You've got the host file that it's going to be referencing, and it's going to install an Apache web server. And I'm going to show you how you would extend this functionality out to maybe a group of web servers that you had by simply modifying the Ansible host file. So let's go ahead and dive in and get this knocked out. We're going to do it all in one video. So one of the first things that we're going to be dealing with is that hosts file. So remember now, we are in the Ansible Apache or ansible-apache directory here. We're no longer in the ansible-csr1kv. That was our last set of labs in 747. So we want to bring VS Code so that it is displaying the Ansible-Apache directory and all the files that we might have in here. So first things first, here's our hosts file. Now, we've already seen this if you watch the supplemental video where we can create a group. And then instead of having multiple host entries in our playbook, we simply reference the group in this inventory file. And here is the address that we're going to be using on the DEVASC virtual machine. And this is a dummy address. We're going to be taking a look at it in just a second. But I also wanted to show you. So let's say that you had 3 other Ubuntu servers, and this was their IP addresses, and they had the same username and the same password. They're commented out right now. All I would have to do is uncomment these lines out. And when I run my Ansible playbook to install my Apache web server and configure it to run on port 8081, it's going to do it on every single host that I've got listed here. So again, just like that Python script that we looked at backing up multiple devices that used a list with dictionaries, here in the Ansible inventory file, all I would have to do is just list out the IP addresses of the hosts, how I'm going to connect via SSH, what username, and then give the password. And I'm installing web servers, and I've got it completely automated. So yeah, we've got some upfront time that we would have to use to do the configuration, but at the end of the day, if you could configure 100, 1,000 Apache web servers by simply using an inventory file and running one playbook file, one Ansible playbook, I mean, that's gold, right? That's gold. Automation gold right there. So that's our host file. So let's jump over to the CLI real briefly because there's a couple things that we are asked to do. The first is we're asked to start up SSH. Now you might be wondering, well, wait a minute, I already ran the SSH command when I went over to the 192.168.1.121, the Cisco CSR1KV. So I've already run SSH, so the server's running, right? Well, the answer is no. That is a client command. That's me running the SSH binary client to make an SSH connection. That is not the DEVASC virtual machine running SSH, allowing SSH connections. So how do we do that? Well, let's go ahead and say sudo systemctl start SSH. Now, what I maybe should have done prior to that, and I'll show you what that would look like, is to say status, right? And we can see here's the status that SSH is running. How can I stop SSH, right? Let's stop it, and then let's rerun the status command. You can see there where it says active, it says inactive dead. And it is definitely inactive dead. So let's kick off the service with sudo systemctl start SSH. Take a look at our status, make sure it's running, and there it is, because we're going to be connecting to the DEVASC virtual machine using some SSH connections. Now, the lab actually shows you the 2 commands you would need to run if maybe your Ubuntu server, because this is preloaded, the SSH pass and OpenSSH server are 2 modules that are already installed on our DEVASC virtual machine for us. Now, if you didn't have those, it would be sudo apt-get install OpenSSH-server, right? And so you could run that command there, or, and again, you can see it's already there, or we could run sudo apt-get install SSH pass, right? But again, it's already here. We already have the newest version of both of those, so we're good to go. Okay, so now that is running. Again, we could take a look at our status to make sure we didn't break it when we ran that apt-get install. So those commands are there. We've already looked at the host file. Now, since we're on the CLI, why are we using that 192.0 address, right? We don't have a local address on my local network here, 192.168. But take a look here. They've configured 5 dummy addresses that we can use throughout the labs, right? These 192.0.2.1s, or I should say .1, .2, .3, .4, that we can use in our labs. And you can see we're going to be using specifically 192.0.2.3. All right. So we've got that taken care of. We've got the Ansible inventory file created. If we go back over here to VS Code, and that's my hosts file, right? The inventory file is already created. So now what we want to do is we want to set up an Ansible config file. Now remember, the default Ansible config file sits in /etc/Ansible. And when would we get to that? When would we actually end up referencing that file? Well, remember, the Ansible, when we run Ansible, it's going to use an order of operations, order of precedence as to where it looks for that file. So the first place it's going to look is it's going to look to see if you have the configuration variable set up for it, which is that Ansible_config environment variable. Now, obviously, we don't have that set up, but if we did, that is actually where Ansible would go to look first to see, hey, is the Ansible config file defined with an environment variable? If it's not, the second place it looks is in the current working directory. If it's not in the current working directory, then it goes to look to see if it's in the home directory, in your home directory. If it's not in your home directory, then it uses /etc/Ansible/ansible.cfg. So we're not going to set an environment variable up to do this, the Ansible_config environment variable. We're going to set it up in the current working directory. And this is our very trimmed down version. Again, this is all we're going to need to do what we're doing here. So the first line, which when we go to run the Ansible-playbook, you wouldn't need, but when we go to run some of the commands you're going to see right after we look at this file here, we do want to have this command in here. And that tells us, hey, where's the inventory file at? Where's that hosts file? And it's // so it's in this current working directory, ansible-apache. It's right in here. Are we checking the SSH keys? No. Are we going to track retry files? Absolutely not. And this is really all we need. So now that we have that, we've got the host file. We've got the Ansible config file in our current working directory. If I say ls, you can see that it's right there, ansible.config. What can we do? All right, well, we can use the Ansible command here and use the group name in the inventory file. Again, this is where the Ansible config file that we just created here is critical, because Ansible is going to look in the current working directory, because it's not going to find the Ansible_config environment variable. It's going to look here. It's going to find the Ansible config variable that says, yeah, the host file is also right here in this current working directory. So I can reference web servers because Ansible's going to know. It's going to recurse down to that host file, and it's going to find the web servers group, which has the 192.0.2.3 host defined in that web servers group. So we're going to test the ping command here, right? And what do we get? Well, we get success, which is exactly what we're looking for. All right, well, now we're going to run another Ansible command here. We're going to run it to that run to the web servers group again. And the -m is really, excuse me, okay. What command is it do we want to run? Initially, we ran ping, but now we're going to run a command that's going to use, and you could use double quotes or single quotes here. I'm going to say bin echo hello world. And you might be wondering, okay, great. So you ran the ping command, and then you go off and you run this, and I got a typo in there. What do we got? Bin, and I didn't say ECHO. There we go. So that should work. There we go. All right. So quick typo, worked around it, figured it out, fixed it, and now we've got this echo command that runs this bin echo hello world. And you might be wondering, okay, well, why is it that we're running this? And you're going to see a little bit later on when we get these playbooks ready why we want to see that this stuff works, why we want to see that running these commands is working. All right, so now we're going to create the playbooks. Right now, the playbooks, I've already typed in everything we're going to need. We're going to start with a simple playbook here. Let's pull up our VS Code, and the first one we're going to look at is test Apache playbook, right? And again, take a look here. What we just did on the command line, this should look very familiar, right? So that's why we ran it on the command line to see, hey, does this work? And for that command to echo out hello world, to do it on the command line, no big deal, right? But now when we're going to build a web server, we're not doing that from the command line. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. So we're going to stick that into an Ansible playbook. So again, we've got your customary 3 dashes at the very top here to say that, hey, this is a YAML file. Again, not required, but best practice. Let's just drop them in there. And then we've got our host, right? Where do I find the host that I'm going to be running this playbook against? Well, it's the web servers group. How does this Ansible playbook know where the hosts are defined? It looks at the Ansible config file that we have in the current working directory. It sees that in there, my inventory file is in this current working directory, and the name of it is hosts. So that's how the Ansible playbook is going to know where those hosts are at, which is simply going to be this host itself, the DEVASC virtual machine 192.0.2.3. Now, what are our tasks? Well, my only task and my first task is to simply run the echo command, right? And this is how you would say it. Here's the name of the task, run echo command. What is the command? Bin echo hello world. So this is how you would do exactly what we just did right here on the CLI and putting it into a playbook. So that's how you would do that. So how are we going to test this playbook? Well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to run Ansible dash playbook dash V for verbose. And we're going to say test underscore Apache underscore playbook dot YAML. So we're going to get all kinds of cool information here. It's going to go out, it's going to gather some facts, and we're going to run that echo command. And you can see that we get the changed, right? It ran this command. If I run it again, it's going to do the same thing. And we're going to see that we've got output here that is very similar to what we just had, right? So really, all we did was we ran the Ansible playbook, and it runs this CLI, this bin echo command, hello world, from the CLI here on the DEVASC virtual machine. Now, what happens if I stop the SSH server? And again, you might have been scratching your head like, well, wait a minute, why do they have us start the SSH server? So remember, if I say sudo systemctl status SSH, you can see that the SSH server is running. Well, let's stop it and see if that has any impact on, and you can see now that it's been stopped. So let's see if this has any impact on me running my Ansible playbook, right? It probably does not, right? So even with the SSH server stopped, I'm able to run my playbook, right? So, but again, we're going to need the SSH server. So let's go ahead and kick that back on. All right. So the SSH server didn't impact us there, but we'll see later on where it would have an impact. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drop back into VS Code, right? We've got our little test Apache playbook right here where, hey, can we run a echo command, right? And that worked out great. So now we're going to ratchet things up a little bit, right? We're going to go to our install Apache playbook, and holy Toledo, is there more code in here. So again, we've got our 3 lines. Hey, this is a YAML file, right? Our 3 dashes. What group of hosts, or what host are we gonna be modifying with our Ansible playbook, right? We're gonna go after the web servers group. We already know where that is defined. We saw this in the supplemental tutorial. Are we gonna elevate our privileges? And the answer is yes, right? So we're gonna go to become the root user to run a lot of these tasks. And so if I was to scroll down here, right, let's take a look at all of the tasks. And there are a number of different tasks that we're going to be running. And you know what? Install Apache playbook. And did I not? You know what? I didn't. Hold on one second here. So this is actually supposed to be install Apache2 enable mod rewrite, and then we've got our handlers. So I'm sorry, I had a little bonus config in there that I was staging for us. Whoops. Okay, and we'll do that right there. Okay, so this is actually all of the configuration information that is in the first playbook file that we're going to be using. So what are the tasks that we're doing? Well, we've got a task here called install Apache2. And this is going to run the app module, right? The apt-get or apt-get install. What's the name of the module that we want to install? Apache2. Update cache, yes, and state latest, right? So we want to get the latest version of Apache2 and we want to install that on the DEVASC virtual machine. And then what's our next task? We're going to enable the, oh, I said mode rewrite. This is mod rewrite. Apologize there. Let's save it real quickly. So we're going to enable mod rewrite, right? And that's an Apache2 module. We're going to go out and get it, and we're going to run it. And then we've got this notify restart Apache2. Now, this notify is linked to the handler. The handler down here by itself doesn't do anything. We need to call the handler by name. So when I say notify restart Apache2, I'm looking for a resource, a handler that's got this name restart Apache2. So notify calls the handler, and what does the handler do? It restarts the Apache2 server. So after we enable the mod rewrite module for Apache, we restart the Apache server. And this is going to happen super quick, right? Super, super quick. Okay. And again, become is the keyword that's going to activate sudo or sudo command execution. All right. Let's see what we've got here. So now we're off and running. Let's run this playbook and let's see if Apache actually gets installed here. Again, I haven't tested this, so this will be interesting to see, if we've got typos and all kinds of stuff. We're going to do -v. We want to get verbose output, and we're going to do install _ Apache _ playbook.yaml. And there it is, and off we go. So we're gathering facts, right? Can we get to the 192.0.2.3? We can, right? That's our local machine that we're actually on the same machine. And now we're installing Apache 2. Again, the lab gives you a little note. It says it could take 30 seconds. It could take a minute or so, depending upon your internet connection. And this should not take too much longer. And there we go. And it's restarting Apache, and boom, we are done, right? So very, very quick. The play recap should display okay, and it does, right? The tasks that we did, and failed 0. So, but look at all this information that we get here about the Apache web server. And let me ask you this, when you look at this, right? Yeah, this initial information here is kind of, it's a little formatting or whatever, but look at that. What is that? What if we were to maybe grab all of this main dictionary with key value pairs, right? And we've got all kinds of information. And again, we could parse through all of that. So again, something to think about. All right. So we've got the Apache web server installed. How do we check that? Well, again, it's a system process. So sudo system ctl status Apache2. And again, maybe I should have ran that before, right? So can I stop Apache 2? Let's try to stop it. And then let's run the status again. And there you go. It shows stop. How do I restart it? Right? Come back in here. Now that we've got it all installed and configured, I say system cuttle or sudo system cuttle start Apache 2. We take a look at our status, and it is running, right? So everything is good. We've got the Apache 2 web server running. It's running on the 192.0.2.3. So here's a question. How can we test that? Well, I should be able to pull up my Chromium web browser here and localhost, and it should be running on port 80. And again, I don't have to type in the 80. That's the default, but I was there. So I typed it in, and boom. We are now running an Apache Ubuntu or Apache web server on our Ubuntu DevASC virtual machine. And again, imagine if you had to install this on 20 Ubuntu boxes or 5 Ubuntu boxes. how easy would it be to create the Ansible playbook, the Ansible config file, and the inventory file to run off and automate all of that, right? It's like having a superhero power. Okay, so now we're on part 5 of the lab because we are again going to ratchet things up here. So Apache's running on port 80, and that's the default, and that's cool. But we want to now go into this install Apache options playbook. And so what are we going to do? Well, we're going to ratchet our Ansible playbook up here. Again, run it on the web servers group, which is the one host. Become yes, meaning yeah, we're going to sudo the commands. So what are the tasks here? Well, we're going to install another Apache web server. We are going to enable the, I can't believe I got that wrong twice, the mod rewrite, and I was probably just typing mod and thought mode, so typed in mode. So that's the mod rewrite module for Apache. And then you can see here, notify, restart Apache. So we're down here, and there it is under the name, right? The handler restart Apache. So that's going to restart the Apache web server for us. But now we've got some additional information in here. This job name, Apache listen on port 8081. So line in file, and this is where we get into sort of the nosebleed altitude a little bit here of the Ansible config file. So we're going to be looking inside the ports.conf file for this regular expression, which is the line that begins where this is at the beginning of the line and it says listen 80. And we're going to change that. If I slide on over here, we're going to substitute that line for this line that says listen 8081. And so that's what that regular expression is doing. So what we're doing here is we're modifying the etc Apache2 ports.conf file, and we're going to substitute in line 8081 for this listen 80. And then we are going to look for, we're going to notify whatever the job is that would restart Apache 2. Well, that's our handler. What does our handler do? It just restarts Apache 2. So then the next thing we come down to is we look at the sites available, right? The virtual host, the Apache 2 virtual host on port 8081. So we're looking for this file here, the 000-default.conf. When we run the web server, we're going to look for this line, and that is at the very beginning of the line. That virtual host has to be at the very beginning. That's the anchor, the caret, anchors that search to the beginning of the line. And we're looking for this line that says run this on the virtual host on port 80. Over here, we're replacing that line to say 8081. And then what do? We restart the Apache web server so that everything is running on port 8081. Again, it looks really complicated, but when we break it down, we can see we're just like searching in these two files and replacing the lines that say listen on port 80 and hey, run on port 80 to listen on port 8081 and hey, run on port 8081 on my virtual machine. And so it's similar to the last playlist, but we're going to be doing some automation or some auto magic changes there. Okay, so what it wants us to do, and if I was to save this file here, what it wants us to do is we're going to come back out to the command line, and let's actually take a look at the files that we're modifying. So what is in etc Apache2 from when we installed the Apache 2 web server in the ports.conf file? There it is, right? So what are we looking for? That regular expression is going to try to match the line where listen 80 is listen begins the line, right, with a caret anchoring it here. That's what we're grabbing, right? And we're replacing that with 8081. And what about the sites available? And so let's go ahead and say sites available and then the 000-default.conf. And tons of stuff going on here. But again, if I come back up here, there it is. There's the line we're looking for, right? And we're anchoring our search so that has to begin that line, start that line out. And we're going to replace the *:80 with *:8081. That's all we're doing. All right. Well, again, we've got a much more advanced Ansible playbook here, but could I run this on 100 different Ubuntu servers defined in my web servers group, you absolutely could if this is what you were trying to do. So let's get our playbook running here. Ansible-playbook minus V, or actually, yeah, I guess we could do the minus V, but it doesn't have us doing that, so we'll do it without it. So install Apache, options. Let's make sure it runs first. Again, I haven't tested this yet. So we're testing right now. All right, could not resolve module action line file. There could be a misspelling, and if it's me, rest assured, there is a misspelling. Well, look at what we did there. So I have line in file here, and then down here I have line file. And so what does it need to be? Well, it needs to be, excuse me, it needs to be line in file, right? So we're looking for the line in the file. All right, fortuitous failure, right? Gives us an opportunity to do some troubleshooting. We fly back over here, and let's see what we get now. Oh, this looks much better. So we're gathering the facts. We're installing Apache2. We're going to be running it on port 8081. So take a look there, right? Handler fail, restart Apache2, and it might have been status Apache2.service. So we ended up with it failed, and it might have failed because things were happening too quickly. Let's take a look here. Let's jump out to our Apache web server, and let's see, is it running on :8081? And we do not get it. Oops, sorry, we do not get it. So let's drop back over to the error message here, and error code. So it's something went wrong with the service, and let's rerun this and see if we can duplicate that error. Unable to restart the service Apache2. All right, so let's go back and take a look at our file, because chances are there could be a typo in here somewhere. And so let's see, we've got the regex, restart Apache2. Did I spell that right? So where's my mistake? Oh, wait, I'm sorry, that is spelled correctly. APACHE2, restart 2. I thought I may have misspelled the Apache2 restart on virtual 8081. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Sites enabled default.conf. 32 virtual host was not closed. So initially started out with that being the possible mistake. Let's see, because I believe it is a typo here that we've got set up here. So I'm looking at this file here to make sure that I don't have a typo. Virtual host :8081. All right, let me try something here, because I don't see a typo in that line, and maybe you do on the virtual host line, but I don't see a typo on that line. So let me try. Oops, sorry. I'll go to the CLI. So let's give this a try. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say sudo systemctl stop Apache2. And then let's do a status on that and see if it's stopped. All right, so failed to start the Apache2 web server. And so that's what we got last. Okay, so the web server failed to start, and it's because of that error that we had. And so let me make sure. Okay, so we're seeing that. Let me see if I can start it manually here. So exit with the error code. Journal exe for, let's do sudo journal ctl-xe. Failed to start the Apache2 web server. And let's take a look at those files that we had looked at previously with, oops, sorry, I didn't want to do that. Do a Control-C there. I wanted to, the two files that we just recently looked at. So I'm going to say bang 2397. And I'm wondering if All right, so the listen is in there. Now, you could ignore these here, this listen 443. We don't have this configured with SSL with assert or anything like that. So, but that actually did what it was supposed to do. And let's cat out the other file, which was that default.conf, which is where we may have this issue here. So 2398, 2398. All right, so the virtual host closes down there, and let's see. Ah, so this looks like it might be our problem here, is it did not do the replacement there. It actually did it down there for the virtual host. I'm wondering, so it should be running on virtual host port 80 and then virtual host port 8081. And let me see. So let's do this. Let's go into that file and let's see if in fact the problem is, I'll comment that line out, if this is the issue, that it didn't replace that. And then let's run our playbook again here. And actually, before we even do the playbook, can I start the Apache2 web service? And no, it doesn't look like it wants to start again. All right, so what's our playbook going to do? So the playbook should still bomb out. So let's check that Ansible playbook. And let's see what happens. Yeah, so again, we end up with the error virtual host was not closed. And so I'm wondering, based on that, if the syntax in that file is that we opened it there, it should have been closed. Oh, and I'm wondering, and again, I'm not an Apache guru here, so let's see if that was the problem. Can I start Apache2 now? Well, it still doesn't like it. What about the playbook? How's the playbook going to handle it? The playbook should still bomb out. So I may need to go back and take a look at some Apache stuff to see what it is inside that default.conf file. And now that I'm thinking of it, right? Again, fortuitous failure. I should have backed that file up before I let the Ansible playbook go after it and try to modify it. So I'm going to pause the video here. Let me dig into some Apache stuff to see if I can figure out why we're getting this error. But we will be right back. All right, we'll talk about the most embarrassing of errors. I decided I was going to step away, grab a bite to eat, come back, and sure enough, that fixed the problem. So I got Apache back and running. We're here on port 80. Right, so I got that fixed. Here was the problem, and maybe if you saw it, you might have been screaming at the screen when I was looking at things. I was thinking I had something misspelled. I was, sure that something was misspelled here, and it wasn't that it was misspelled per se. It was I was missing a line, and it's right here where this regular expression, right? Like, what am I trying to match? Well, I'm trying to match virtual host when it begins at the start of the line. Well, here's the problem. What I left out was the beginning less than sign. Because if you go look at this file, it starts with the, oops, sorry, that's going to cause even more problems. If you look at this file, it starts with the less than sign, then it says virtual host, and then we've got the port 80. Right? So that little caret right there, or I'm sorry, that little less than sign right there caused, oops, I didn't want to do that, so let's bail out of there, caused all of those issues. So we've got it running on port 80. Now let's rerun this with the correct regular expression for the 000 default.conf, and let's save the file here, and let's see if this works. Again, we're up and running on port 80. Everything is good. And, oops, sorry. And let's go ahead and jump onto the CLI here. And before we do that, let me go ahead and say history and grep vi, because we want to say If we go in, we want to look at these two files real quick. So 2457. So right here, this one worked, right? And it matched listen because, again, listen, it doesn't have a beginning less than sign, right? And so here it worked. It wasn't a problem. But in the default comp file, 2458, at the end here, it does begin with a less than sign. Excuse me. But more importantly, at the beginning, it begins with a less than sign. And I did not have that in there. And therefore, it would not make the match there. And we would have issues. All right. So now let's go ahead. We're running on port 80. Let's kick it off. Let's do our ansible-playbook. And we're going to do a dash. We'll throw the -v in there. And this is going to be the, what are we looking for here? Install Apache options to get it running on port 8080. Again, I haven't tested this either, but that typo has to be the issue because I was missing. And lo and behold, take a look at that. Nothing failed. Everything worked. Final test. We're going to pull up Chromium. We're going to refresh port 80. You'll notice it's not running on port 80 anymore. All right, let's check it out. 80, 81. And there it is. And so now I could run off and configure my Apache web server. Let's take one last look here real quickly at the ports.conf, modified it. So a good something to think about is maybe copying the ports.conf file off before you run the Ansible script, or have Ansible do that for you to make a copy of those files, or you manually do it. And then let's take a look one last time at that 000 default.conf, and now we've got the match right there with the *:8081 because we had the right virtual host statement in there, and then we close the virtual host out. Everything worked fantastically. So again, sometimes taking a step away, and whoops, we don't want to look at the MapQuest API. Sometimes taking a step away and then coming back to the problem with a fresh set of eyes after some lunch is always a good idea. All right, well, thank you guys so much for watching. Great stuff in this video from an Ansible perspective. And now you can get out there and modify, extend the functionality of some of these Ansible scripts and see what you can do. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, I hope to see you in the next video.